My family called me jobless at Christmas dinner, mocked me for working in a garage. What they didn't know, I'd already closed $1 million deal and was building a company that would one day own their careers. 1 year later, they never expected what happened. I will tell you how everything unfolded. Before we get into the details of the story, we share stories like this every day. If you love them, don't forget to subscribe. Kindly leave a comment telling us where you are watching from. We'd love to stay connected. Now let's get into the details of the story. At Christmas dinner, they passed the stuffing and their judgment. My cousin Derek, full of wine and ego, leaned across the table and asked if I was still fixing junk in the garage. Everyone laughed, even Aunt Claire, who still owed me money from her car repairs. Todd, my brother-in-law, chimed in with a smirk. Well, not everyone's cut out for the market. They thought it was harmless ribbing, but what they didn't know? I'd made my first million 3 weeks earlier. My name is Joseph Hartley, 36 years old. Mechanical engineer by training, entrepreneur by necessity. I used to work for a mid-tier manufacturing firm just outside of Columbus until they slashed half the department 2 years ago. 1 minute I was redesigning turbine brackets, the next I was carrying my life in a cardboard box through an icy parking lot. No severance. No warning. Just an empty driveway and a 1,000-yard stare. For months, I tried to play the game. Applications. Interviews. Rejection emails that started with "unfortunately" and ended with "best of luck." I dipped into savings. Sold my car. I was one bill away from defaulting on my mortgage when I finally stopped trying to rejoin their world and built my own. I turned the garage into a lab. Started small, reverse engineering solar inverters. Then microgrid controllers. My fingers blistered. My credit tanked. But by month 9, I had something that worked. The prototype was ugly, duct tape, wire spaghetti, scrap copper, but it generated stable current off partial sunlight. I pitched it to a small green tech expo in Dayton. No one paid attention, except one man, Stephen Hanley, retired Air Force engineer. Said he saw promise. Said he knew people. We talked. He tested. He called me 2 days later and said one word. Funded. We kept it quiet. Hanley taught me how to move under radar. We filed patents under shell LLCs, hired lawyers through anonymous retainers. Every meeting was under NDA. Our prototype scaled into a system, a modular, low-cost solar array with 40% higher efficiency than anything on the market. We tested it on a school district in Arizona. By the time the second system went live, we had interest from 2 federal agencies. But at the family table, none of that mattered. To them, I was still Joe. Jobless Joe. Our garage guy. The family disappointment. Todd leaned over and whispered to his wife, loud enough for me to hear, maybe we should gift him a tie. You know, in case he ever lands a real job. Derek was worse. He runs a consulting firm, whatever that means. Flashy suits. Instagram posts with hashtags like #bossmoves and #mobilemindset. He once sold our grandmother's antique vase on eBay and claimed it was redistributing legacy assets. At dinner, he toasted the power of calculated risk and glanced at me like I was the cautionary tale. My mother laughed nervously. My father stared at his plate. I sat there, hands clenched beneath the table, biting my cheek until I tasted blood. What would they have said if they knew? That I had a signed letter of intent from a Department of Energy subcommittee? That I was weeks away from hiring a full-time staff? That our latest prototype had just passed field tests with 99.6% uptime in harsh conditions? I could have shut them all up in 5 seconds. But I didn't. Because I didn't want applause. I wanted silence. I excused myself after dessert. No one noticed. My sister was arguing with her husband over who would drive. Aunt Claire was showing off her new bracelet, pretending it wasn't a knockoff. I walked out into the cold, my breath fogging in the porch light, and climbed into my truck, the same one Todd called quaint. I gripped the wheel until my knuckles popped. Humiliation is an ember. At first, it just glows. Then it smolders. Then it consumes. I stared at my reflection in the windshield and swore I'd never sit at that table like that again. Not as a joke. Not as a ghost. If they wanted to laugh at the garage guy, fine. I'd build something so big they'd never laugh again. And if they did, they'd be laughing from inside my building. Back at home, I opened the safe behind the water heater and pulled out the folder. Contracts. Licensing documents. Partner agreements. Every page was a weapon. Every number, a countdown. I laid them across the floor like puzzle pieces. The plan wasn't finished yet, but it would be. They thought the garage was a joke. They had no idea it was a throne. They thought they'd buried me. But I wasn't underground. I was planted. And now I was growing. Losing your job isn't like flipping a switch. It's more like a slow power outage. The lights flicker, then die. When I got laid off, there wasn't a dramatic exit. No shouting. Just a handshake, a severance packet with no money in it, and a walk to the parking lot where my car had 2 missed payments and a busted starter. I remember sitting in the driver's seat, staring at the cracked windshield, wondering what the hell I was supposed to do next. For 3 months, I scraped by, sold off old tools, cashed out my 401k. I pawned my watch, my bike, even my dad's drill set. I collected scrap metal from construction sites, sometimes fighting off other guys with the same idea. My house edged closer to foreclosure with every bill I stuffed in a drawer. I ate canned soup and showered at the YMCA. I didn't tell anyone. My pride wouldn't let me. The garage became my refuge. It was the only place where I still felt like myself. I started tinkering with old solar gear, broken panels, outdated batteries, busted converters. I'd always been good with systems, so I started reverse engineering everything I touched. Every failure taught me something. Every mistake burned into my skin, literally. My forearms looked like I'd wrestled a soldering iron. I went to bed smelling like flux and copper. The nights blurred. I'd sleep in the recliner, tools scattered around me, designs etched on pizza boxes. But there was something building in me. Something sharp, pure, a refusal to drown quietly. One morning, I connected 2 circuits, ran a test, and the current held steady for an hour. I didn't cheer, didn't dance, just stared at it, breathing like I'd been underwater too long. That's when I met Mr. Hanley. Stephen Hanley, 65, former DoD engineer with a limp and a grim sense of humor. He saw me hauling a busted battery from a junkyard and offered me a ride. We started talking shop. He didn't laugh when I explained my idea. Building a modular solar system that adapted to output loads in real time. Instead, he listened, nodded, then said, "Come by my workshop. Let's see if it's real." His place was heaven, lined with parts, blueprints, gear older than me. We spent days tweaking voltage regulators, testing thermals, refining the inverter logic. Hanley called me a dangerously competent bastard. I took it as a compliment. After 2 months, we had a working prototype. Compact, cheap, stable, and scalable. A self-adjusting microgrid array that could run on partial sunlight and low-cost materials. We brought it to a small clean energy summit in Indiana. Low stakes. Just academics and weirdos. I presented to a half-full room. No slideshow. Just numbers and sweat. Most people walked out. Except one man. Carter Yates. Mid-40s, quiet, sharp-eyed. Said he worked for a private green tech investment firm. Said our numbers looked impossible. Hanley handed him the test data. He called back 2 days later. Funding came fast. Quiet, too. Mates liked our paranoia. We incorporated under a shell name. Patents filed with lawyers Hanley trusted from his military days. Our prototype became a product line. First test install was at a charter school in Arizona. Low power draw, off-grid, lots of sun. System held up through the whole quarter with 40% less downtime than the national average. We added features, dynamic load balancing, cloud-linked diagnostics. We built 3 more test sites, a small farm in Texas, a storm shelter in Oklahoma, a rec center in Nevada. By year's end, we had proposals drafted for government contracts. 5 states expressed interest. Our small idea had become a threat to every aging energy monopoly in the country. Hanley gave me 49% equity. "You built the bones," he said. "I'll manage the vultures." We hired 5 engineers, leased a space outside Cincinnati. Every week brought new interest. Contractors, city planners, private equity. I had money now. Real money. The kind of wealth that doesn't flash, it hides in quiet LLCs and untraceable transfers. My bank account had 6 zeros, and I still drove the same truck Todd mocked. But I stayed quiet. I didn't post online. Didn't update LinkedIn. No media coverage. I refused interviews. I wasn't building a reputation. I was building a war chest. because I hadn't forgotten that Christmas dinner. The laughter, the smug glances. The pity masked as concern. I didn't want an apology. I wanted control. The kind of control where they'd need me before they recognized me. The kind where they'd walk through doors I built and never know who unlocked them. They'd see my name last, on the documents, on the contracts, on the letterhead, just in time to realize whose name they'd laughed at. So I waited. And worked. Every week, we grew. Every day, I collected the pieces. The filings. The partnerships. The acquisitions. Derek's firm? I tracked their holdings. Todd's real estate fund? Already bleeding from the zoning changes I'd helped influence. I wasn't just rich. I was becoming inevitable. And the best part? They still thought I was broke. Let them laugh. Let them toast. The debt they never saw was already collecting interest. And the collector? He was coming soon. A year passed, and the silence was my weapon. I stayed beneath radar, letting my name dissolve into fog while my company surged forward. The moment the market dipped, I struck. Derek's firm, Blake and Royston Strategies, saw a 12% stock slide after a bad quarter. I moved through a network of 3 shell companies and quietly purchased controlling shares. By the time Derek noticed, I already owned 61%. He thought he was bleeding from a bad earnings call. He never saw the knife. I didn't take his title. That would be too easy. I restructured the firm quietly, cut departments that underperformed, merged divisions under shell branches, shifted assets into my energy ventures. Derek spent weeks trying to secure private equity to stay afloat. Unaware, I was killing every deal from the other side of the phone. I wanted him to feel it, not as a blow, but a long, slow compression, like drowning under glass. Meanwhile, Todd was busy breaking ground on a luxury condo project in a gentrifying corner of Cleveland. What he didn't know was that my firm had recently been appointed to the city's advisory board on green zoning. I slipped 2 lines into the revised code under the pretense of sustainability enforcement, lines that rendered his foundation plan non-compliant. His permits stalled. His lenders balked. The construction halted. And his silence grew louder. Derek's assistant, Amanda, was sharp but underpaid. I found her through a recruiter and offered double her salary to consult on her old firm's audit. She accepted in a heartbeat. She brought files, emails, call logs, records of Derek offering unofficial incentives to investors. I bundled them neatly and sent them directly to the SEC. No signature, just facts. And a quiet note, start here. It was surgical. Derek was summoned for a compliance hearing 2 weeks later. His partners panicked. 2 of them resigned. I scheduled an emergency board meeting and watched him walk in, gray-faced, sleep-deprived. I wore a mask of concern, pretended to share his horror. We'll get through this, I said. Inside, I was grinning. At my main company, Sovereign Grid Solutions, we were expanding rapidly. I needed mid-level managers. I set up interviews under a new subsidiary, West Holdings, and sent quiet invitations to 3 very specific applicants, Todd, Derek, and our cousin Eli. None of them knew it was me. The interviewers were actors. The HR branding was temporary. The bait was power. Todd fell first. His real estate firm was hemorrhaging. He walked into our downtown office wearing a $300 tie and a nervous smile. Said he was ready for a new challenge. We gave him a desk, an office, a title that sounded important. But he answered to a 26-year-old analyst. Eli followed. He pitched synergy models using recycled buzzwords. We gave him a 6-month contract with no decision-making power. He accepted like we were granting him citizenship. Derek held out. Pride, maybe. But after the SEC hearing, he caved. He asked for a position under West's Corporate Advisory Council. We gave him one. Technically, he worked in procurement analysis, sifting through vendor lists and pretending his decisions mattered. None of them knew the real structure. None of them knew who signed their checks. They all worked for me. I walked past their offices weekly. Said nothing. Sometimes I'd leave post-it notes with vague compliments. Good insight on Monday's brief. Appreciated your input in the vendor review. They ate it up. Each praise was a leash. They thought they were rising. They were already buried. I rebranded West after the first quarter. Changed the logo. Shifted the HQ. The old staff was reassigned. The new hires remained. I watched them settle in like fleas on new fur, unaware they were already owned. It wasn't about humiliation. It was about control. I didn't want them broken. I wanted them dependent. Their emails changed tone. Less arrogance, more deference. Derek started signing off with, "Let me know how I can support." Todd asked permission to lead a minor project. Eli submitted weekly status reports unsolicited. I had an entire archive labeled Pride Collapse. I read them late at night, sipping whiskey, remembering Christmases past. One Friday, I hosted a leadership retreat. Only senior staff, except I made a quiet exception for 3 names. Sent them personal invites. Rented a conference center at a lakeside resort. The agenda was vague. Team building. Strategic visioning. They came, of course, dressed their best, hoping for recognition. I let them speak first during the roundtable. Let them feel seen. Then I stood up, took the floor. I didn't introduce myself. Just talked about legacy, about failure, about what it means to be underestimated. I saw their eyes shift, puzzled. I pulled up a slide, 3 resumes, redacted. All theirs. Then I put up the corporate tree. My name at the top. Silence. Thick and sharp. Todd's mouth opened. Derek stared at the screen. Eli looked at the floor. I said nothing. Just watched. Then I smiled and clicked to the next slide, performance forecasts. Their names sat at the bottom. I ended the presentation with one sentence. This is what it looks like when the garage guy draws the map. They clapped. Awkwardly. The room broke for lunch. I left through the back. Took the elevator to the parking garage. Drove away before dessert was served. The next day, Todd emailed me a thank you note. Derek submitted a new proposal. Eli asked to shadow the strategy team. I made them need me, and they had no idea just how much they did. The invitation was wrapped in black foil and embossed in gold. Minimal, elegant, no names, just a date, a time, and the words, Leadership Summit, Lakecrest Estate. Each envelope was hand-delivered, couriered with a gift box of artisan truffles and a miniature bottle of wine. One set went to every employee under Ember West Holdings. Another went to every member of my extended family. Yes, even Aunt Claire. The venue sat on the edge of a private lake 2 hours outside the city. Originally a governor's summer retreat, I'd purchased it through a shell firm 6 months prior. Renovations finished just in time. Italian marble, glass atrium, velvet hallways, a staff trained in corporate etiquette and psychological warfare disguised as customer service. It didn't look like an event. It looked like a coronation. They arrived just after noon. Black cars, flashes of cologne and ambition. My team, now nearly 200 strong, filtered through the welcome lounge, accepting branded portfolios, custom engraved pens, and embossed leather notebooks. I watched from behind mirrored glass as Todd stepped into the main hall, blinking like a tourist. Derek followed, flanked by 2 interns. Even Eli showed up, dressed too formally for someone barely clinging to middle management. The family arrived separately. My mother gasped at the chandelier. My father remained quiet. Derek's parents made jokes about how fancy corporate life has gotten. No one knew whose house they stood in. Not yet. Dinner was served in the central atrium. 70-foot ceilings. A string quartet. Wine poured from bottles that cost more than Derek's first car. I mingled, shook hands, offered nods. My family gravitated toward Todd. He'd always been their symbol of success. Real estate, luxury cars, polished arrogance. He gave them the illusion of safety. A familiar villain. After dessert, the lights dimmed. I walked onto the main stage. No teleprompter. No notes. Just me and a wireless mic. The room hushed. Even the waitstaff froze. I looked around. Familiar faces and unfamiliar masks. Todd leaned back, arms crossed. Derek squinted. My mother looked confused. Perfect. Thank you all for coming, I said. Tonight isn't just about leadership. It's about origin stories. About how empires rise. And more importantly, how people reveal themselves in the absence of applause. I clicked the remote. The first slide flashed on screen, a family Christmas photo. Circa 2021. Me at the edge, half cut from the frame. Todd mid-toast. Derek grinning like a stock photo. Laughter rippled across the room. Then silence. I clicked again. Up came the Ember West hierarchy chart. Rows of names. Photos. Job titles. Department ratings. Metrics. Bonuses. Performance scores. I didn't have to say anything. They saw it. Todd, operations support. Derek, procurement analysis. Eli, junior strategist. Their eyes darted. Mouths opened. I clicked again. Emails flashed on screen. Praise they'd written. Excited to contribute. Humbled to be part of the mission. Learning so much. I paused. Let the words settle. Then clicked to a slide that simply read, Perspective. I stepped away from the podium and let the screen do the talking. My full name appeared at the top of the org chart. The legal entity registry followed. Paper trails, LLC filings, controlling interests. The lights shifted slightly, spotlight now on me. Some gasped. Others muttered. I saw Todd's posture change like someone had kicked his knees. Derek looked sick. My mother covered her mouth. No one suspected the garage guy, I said, voice calm. But that's the thing about building quietly. You get to choose when the volume goes up. I ended with one final slide. Promotions pending. It listed 10 employees slated for advancement. None of them were family. Then I raised my glass. To small beginnings, I said, pausing in smaller minds. There was no applause. Just the scrape of forks. The clink of uncomfortable glasses. I drank. Slowly. Made eye contact with each one. Then I walked off stage. The rest of the night moved in slow motion. Conversation shifted. Politeness cracked into unease. My mother asked if we could talk. I told her not tonight. Todd tried to play it off. Hell of a speech, Joe. Got us good. But I didn't smile. I looked right through him. Derek cornered me by the bar. Why didn't you just tell us? He hissed. I leaned in. Because if you knew, you'd never have applied. And I needed you in the system before I flipped the switch. He looked like he might swing. He didn't. He walked away. Later, I stood by the lake, watching the moon ripple on the surface. A few younger employees came out to thank me. They didn't understand the weight of the night. That was fine. This wasn't for them. It was for the ghosts. I had spent 2 years crafting this moment. Not just the revenge, but the reveal. Not a scream, not a brawl. A quiet stage. A clicker. A screen. A truth so undeniable it didn't need to be repeated. They knew now. Who I was. What I'd built. What I controlled. And more importantly, they knew who they had mocked. Who they had dismissed. And who now held the keys. The retreat ended the next morning. Some left early. Todd avoided eye contact. Derek checked out without saying a word. Eli tried to book a one-on-one meeting. I denied it. My father shook my hand. My mother kissed my cheek. Neither said much. They didn't need to. I returned to my penthouse alone. No champagne. No celebration. Just silence. Heavy, earned. 3 months passed. The fallout lingered. Family group chats grew silent, then fractured. Some cousins blocked me. Others sent half-hearted apologies. Derek's parents sent a fruit basket with a typed note. Hope you're doing well. Todd never reached out, but his assistant called twice, begging for reconsideration after his performance metrics dropped. Eli asked to shadow me again. I ignored him. My mother apologized in person. My father stayed quiet. That was enough. The company surged ahead. New contracts signed in 3 states. A grant from the Department of Energy. Press requests. Award nominations. I turned them all down. Let my staff take the credit. I wasn't building a legacy to be adored. I was building a fortress that couldn't be mocked. Respect was no longer a wish, it was law. One gray Tuesday, I visited the factory. The place that used to be my garage, then a leased warehouse, now an automated complex 3 stories high. Robotic arms moved in rhythm. Assembly lines buzzed. Drones surveyed roof panels. I walked the length of the floor alone. No cameras. No entourage. Just me and the machine I built. The rage that built it still flickered, but dimmer now. I used to be driven by the echo of laughter, the way they'd smirk, the way they'd whisper. But standing there, surrounded by blinking lights and humming energy, I felt it fade. I didn't need them to apologize. They already had. With their resumes. With their silence. In my office, I stared at the plaque Hanley had made before he passed. Ruin builds empires faster than luck. I owed him more than I'd said. He saw my fury and taught me how to aim it. Not with fire, but with ice. He taught me to let it simmer, not scorch. And that's how I won. I opened the file on my desk, my resignation draft. 3 lines long. No fanfare. No explanation. I had enough money for 10 lifetimes. Enough control to vanish completely. But something held me back. A knock on the door. It was Marissa, one of our first hires. Never complained. Never postured. Just worked. Late. Thorough. Precise. She handed me the quarterly forecast. I asked her what she'd do differently. She listed 3 things sharply, calmly. I nodded. You ever think about running a division? She blinked. No one's ever asked me that. I slid the draft into a drawer and said, I'm asking now. That night, I sat on the terrace of my estate, overlooking the hills. Snow lined the walkways. Lights twinkled on fir trees. The staff prepared for tomorrow's dinner, caterers, decorators, valet drivers. I told them to keep it elegant but cold. No warmth. No illusion of forgiveness. Christmas arrived. The table stretched 40 feet. 12 chairs. All family. They arrived quiet. No jokes. No jabs. Todd brought wine. Derek brought nothing. Eli hugged me too long. I sat at the head, carving meat as the fire crackled behind me. The food was exquisite. The conversation forced. I said little. Let the room squirm. Let them pretend. No one asked about the business. No one mentioned the garage. They knew better, and I didn't need to remind them. That silence. That was the feast. After dessert, my mother raised a toast. To Joseph. For everything. Glasses clinked. My father nodded once. I looked around at the faces that once pitied me, who now depended on me. I didn't smile. But inside, for the first time in years, I felt full. Later, as they filed out, Derek paused by the door. You built something incredible, he said. I nodded. Said nothing. He waited. Then left. That was all I needed. Not praise. Not regret. Just acknowledgement. I walked the halls alone. The estate hummed in winter stillness. The rage that fueled me was ashes now. Cold. Spent. But from it rose something stronger. Discipline. Legacy. Control. I wasn't just the garage guy anymore. I was the quiet CEO. And in silence, I had won it all. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or written off by the people closest to you, then you know what this story was really about. It's not just revenge. It's reclaiming your identity in the quietest, most powerful way possible. If this hit a nerve, subscribe. I've got more stories that don't just entertain, they expose. Comment below. What would you do if you had the chance to turn the tables? And remember, success isn't loud. It's surgical. See you soon in the next story.